Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call this council meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. We have a couple of delegations today and quite a bit on the agenda. And I think we have one visitor that has a commitment, so we need to get moving. So I'm going to ask if anybody has any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we're going to move along to the previous minutes. Moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, second by Councillor Elliott. The minutes of the Town of Minto, July 11th, 2023 regular council meeting be approved. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Next resolution is moved by Councillor Dirksen, second by Councillor Potnovich, that the Town of Minto Council convenes into Committee of the Whole. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So our first public meeting this afternoon is has to do with Municipal Drain 17. And I'm going to chair this public meeting, and I'm going to ask our clerk to outline the purpose.
Thank you, Mayor Churton. The purpose of the meeting is to consider the engineer's report prepared by R.J. Burnside and Associate Limited, dated July 7th, 2023 for Drain 17. Notices of the meeting were sent to 6 landowners, along with copies of the report. Also, copies of the report were circulated to town staff, Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, County of Wellington, and Maitland Valley Conservation Authorities.
So at this time, I'll ask Trevor Kipper to attend the mic, please, and state your name, why you're here. Speak into the mic, too, if you don't mind, please. We've had a few of our faithful people that sit at home and watch these videos tell us that they can't hear. So thank you very much. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mayor Churton and Council. My name is Trevor Kipfer, and with me today is Cody Kipfer. We're both with R.J. Burnside and Associates. Maybe less familiar faces. You'd all be probably more familiar with Greg Nanskville. We both work quite closely with him on this project. Greg is actually on vacation today. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this report for your consideration. Minto Drain 17 is a drainage network just to the southeast of Harriston. The portion of the drain where we're proposing work services lots 100 to 103, concessions C and D in the town of Minto. The improvement request was in response to erosion issues and tile blowouts occurring on lot 101 concession D that were the result of undersized tiles and aged tiles. One was from around 1952 and the other from around 1963. The issues on this property ended partway through where these systems had been replaced in a report that was completed in the early 2000s by J.R. Spreet. So as part of the design process on the project, we completed 2 public meetings. We had an on-site meeting in April of 2023 and a follow-up information meeting in June of 2023. Based on the input from those meetings, our final design is summarized in the report, which I'll give a brief overview here. So we're proposing about 287 meters of concrete and an HDPE tile and destroying the 2 systems. So that was that system from 1952 and 1963. We're proposing 5 concrete structures, completing 1 crossing through the highway with 35 meters of smooth wall welded steel pipe. And then any impacted private drainage tiles we'd be looking at connecting into our system. For costs on the project, we're estimating a construction cost around $98,000. Property owner allowance is estimated at $11,600. Engineering costs estimated at $39,000. Other costs such as net HST, interest charges, permitting costs at around $16,200 for a total cost of $165,000. As far as how those costs are assessed, we have $87,300 assessed to private landowners and $77,700 assessed to the municipality and the county. In this case, the county has the largest brunt of that assessment. And we're anticipating around $29,100 in OMAFRA grant to support the cost for the project. And that's all I have to present for now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Trevor. If you don't mind just staying there, you might have to answer a few questions. So I'm going to ask the public for questions from any affected property owners who are present and wish to provide information that might influence the council's decision on the matter. So any of our groups want to talk or question Trevor or anything? Okay, then we're going to go on to council. Questions from council. Who's first? Just one. I have one question. The pipe that's going across the 109. Will you be digging or will that be pushed through?
That's going to be bored through the highway.
Yep.
To avoid any disturbance to traffic and the asphalt.
Okay. No other questions? Seeing none. I'm going to state that council must decide whether or not to proceed with the project by provisionally adopting the engineer's report by bylaw or referring the report back to the engineers for modifications. There is no right to appeal assessments or the aspects of the engineer's report at this meeting. These appeal rights will be made available later in the procedure. So I'm going to ask Clerk McRobb. There's no other questions. We've had two public meetings, Trevor, and everybody's well aware of what's going on with this drain. So we're in good shape that way. All right, so I'm going to ask Clerk McRobb to note the bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Turton. I just wanted to note that a bylaw will be presented during open council for first and second reading. I would ask perhaps for a motion that council, the town of Minto, accepts the engineer's report for municipal drain 17 and provides a first and second reading of the provisional bylaw in open session.
Okay, so I'll entertain a mover in a second. Councillor Elliott, Deputy Mayor Anderson. So we've heard the motion. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the council of the town of Minto accepts the engineer's report for municipal drain 17 and provides a first and second reading of the provisional bylaw in open session. No further questions. I'm going to ask all in favor of that motion. That motion's carried. So if there's no further questions or anything, I'm going to adjourn the public meeting and consider consideration for the engineer's report, drain number 17. So Trevor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming, you guys.
Thank you.
So our first delegation is from our Wellington County Libraries. I would like to welcome Rosie Krull and Alicia Gildstorm. And we were to have Kaylee Armstrong, but she is not available this afternoon. So these two young ladies are going to carry the weight here.
Thanks
so
so
go
much
ahead.
for having us.
Thank you.
So we were really pleased to be able to give a tour of our Minto libraries, the Palmerston and Harriston branches back in the spring, and we were invited to come and present to council to kind of just share more information about the library system. So we don't have a request today, we more are just excited to share a bit about the Wellington County Library with you. We have our PowerPoint there. So the quote we like is the most powerful card you'll ever carry, because we think libraries give people access to far more than just books. We are one of the only public spaces remaining where people are welcome to come and exist and hang out. There's no expectation of them to spend money or provide services. So our patron base, because of that, is quite diverse. It can be anything from bringing their children in for a story time, coming in for assistance, filling out government forms, faxing those forms, or just having a quiet space to sit and enjoy a magazine, for example, while they're waiting for auto work from Leslie Motors across the street from our branch here in town. All of our branches have maker tools like crickets, for example, to encourage people to explore creativity. And our Palmerston branch in Minto even has a designated inspiration lab to encourage those to get creative with technology and maker culture. In the library, we have our library board, which many of you probably recognize these names from county council. It always has our warden, 4 county councilors, and 4 citizen trustees that are appointed by council. I won't read out all those names. I'm sure you've met them all and know them well yourselves, so we can move on there. We have 14 library branches in Wellington County. We have 3 in Minto, which we are very lucky to have, as you'll see in a slide coming up, 2 Carnegie branches in our Minto selection. So you'll see that the city of Guelph is grayed out there, even though that encompasses within County of Wellington. It does not include our county library system. They have their own system that is separate from our own. So our Carnegie branches include the Fergus, Elora, Palmerston, Harriston, and Mount Forest branches. Palmerston was built back in 1903 and renovated recently in 2016. That's actually the branch I started working at before I moved over to Harriston. Harriston was built in 1908 and renovated a bit longer ago, over a decade now, 2012. And if we move to the next slide there, you can see our beautiful Clifford branch, which was built in 2006. So a newer build altogether and has a really cozy, cottagey vibe. It's one of our favorite branches. And it's not just because we're biased and in the county ourselves or township ourselves, but we can move along there to the rest of our branches. As you can see, each one is, I'd say, fairly unique. Hillsburg is the most recent build, but we will be getting a new branch in Erin coming up in the next little while here. So stay tuned for that exciting project. So introducing the Minto Library staff. On the far right, we have the Harriston staff. Back we have our assistant branch supervisor staff. There's Kathy, Tim, and Michelle, and our lovely pages, Joan and Emma. I'll introduce the Palmerston staff as Kaylee is not here today. Kaylee is the one just in the middle, standing next to Andrea. And on the bottom there we have Ella is our page in Palmerston, and Victoria is one of our assistant branch supervisors as well. And I'll let you.
And in Clifford, we have a very small team, but a dedicated team nonetheless. I have Barb, one of our ABSs. She has been with us for over 30 years at the Clifford Branch Library, and she's very involved in the community. We also have Peter. He's retired, and he is our page. He's very involved in the community as well, and he's on several Clifford committees. So great small team in Clifford. They definitely will remember your face if you come by. They're a great team.
Another familiar face you might recognize if you see him touring by is Brian. That's our library courier. And he transfers over 300,000 items between branches each year. That runs Monday to Saturday, excluding obviously holidays or extremely bad weather days. But he is pretty confident motoring through the worst of weather. So he just trucks on. And some other stats on our next page coming up here. You can take a look. Our total circulation, that's in between our e-circulation as well as physical print, was over 800,000. We offered over 2,000 programs to over 40,000 patrons of all ages. And as you can see, this is our stats from last year. So we even have the number of curbside pickups we did last year. We will hopefully not be tracking that moving forward. We can go ahead to the next slide here to kind of break down those stats a bit further. So our physical collection is still our biggest portion. Obviously, we have about 642,000 physical items we circulated last year, but over 30,000 electronic usages of our databases and other online resources, which I'll talk a bit about. And our ebooks, e-audiobooks, and other content you can access from a tablet, phone, et cetera. Over 200,000 there as well. So if you haven't hooked up with your Libby app yet, I'd highly recommend it. Audiobooks are addictive, and they're really a great way to make boring chores like cleaning your house go a lot faster. We had over 40,000 program attendees, but if we'll have some programming pictures coming up shortly. But before that, our next slide here just has some more of our services. So the library catalog has over 29 library boards that are kind of using that same online ebook to give us more access for all of our patrons. And our databases, this is just a small selection, but Ancestry for people to help track their background and their history. Mango Languages is one we've used with some of the newcomers in town here to get them set up with learning English from home. And CBC Corner is a new one we just added this year, which is a great interactive way to get more information from our CBC news. So outside of the databases, we have a few 3D printers, Crickets. So 9 of our branches have self-checkout services, but that doesn't mean that we still don't have that great service at the desk. There's always someone there to help people out. They always have public access computers. And our interlibrary loans, you might have heard some big news about this when they tried to cut that provincially. Thankfully, we got back some funding for that, so we were able to process over 4,500 items for patrons last year that includes outgoing and ingoing. So it's not just helpful for Wellington County Library patrons, but we can also help those at other library systems as well. We just wanted to share a couple of these nice little quotes and letters we get from people. We're very grateful to be able to serve such a fantastic group of people, and that gratitude kind of is reflected back at us and makes us love our jobs even more than we already do. So.
On that note, we'll move over to our programs. So across our 14 branches, there are several programs that we run, such as book clubs, story times, as well as unique programs to specific locations. So Hairston, we have a monthly ESL conversation circle, a Dungeons and Dragons club. In Clifford, we have gaming events with our collection of board games and our PS5 that lives in Branch. We also have sewing classes for beginners and cricket design classes. And in Palmerston, a weekly inspiration lab for kids and crafting programs for adults. We also have a number of collection items. So we have our print collection, our ebooks and e-audiobooks, our DVDs and DVD players that float through the branches if you need that as well. We also have Wonder Books, video game systems, snowshoes in Hillsburg. We have book club sets, iPads, Chromebooks, hotspots if your Wi-Fi is a little spotty or you're still using dial-up. We also have Ontario Park Passes, Seed Library, board games, home energy toolkits. So we've got a huge collection here across the 14 branches of Wellington County. And I ask, are there any items on this list that maybe you'd want to know more about or something that you're not familiar with that you'd like to know what that is?
Questions? I have one question. How many times is the home energy toolkit put out of the library?
It's relatively new,
Yeah.
so it's a new venture for us, but I've had at least 3 toolkits go out in the last month. So yeah, and we're a smaller branch in Clifford. So if it's going out that much in Clifford, it means it's going out even more in Hairston.
And anecdotally, I can say we're supposed to have one that lives on our shelf in Hairston, and I haven't seen it actually go on a spot we set aside on the shelf for it. It's constantly circulating.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so new item, if you're interested, we have the home energy kits. So you can place a hold on those online or you can ask us about it at the branch. Any other questions about anything on board?
Go ahead. Just ask it, Will.
Yeah, how often do the radon detectors go up?
Also a new venture, but a little bit older. I think we've had them for 3 months now. They were quite popular in the first month. A lot of people wanted to check the radon detectors. So yeah, no, they're going out. I think we still have a holds list on those as well. So yeah, consistently not staying on our shelves. So popular enough for sure.
Go ahead.
You don't have the cricket on this list, but I noticed it on an earlier list. So they stay in the branch?
Yes, so each branch should at this point have a cricket, and you can come in and you can basically rent it to use in branch. And then you can bring your own supplies. I know Walmart and Michael's, they have like cricket selections there, so you can bring your own supplies in and you can do your own activities. And then during our programs, we provide the supplies and you can come in and learn more about the cricket. Especially if you're a beginner, you can learn how to use the machine, or you can just enjoy the fact that we have some extra supplies and a craft already presented and everything. But yeah, they all live in branch.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
What is a Wonder Book?
A Wonder Book, yes. So those are relatively.
Like just regular books. What's a Wonder Book?
A Wonder Book is wonderful because it has a audiobook built into it. So it's a regular picture book or chapter book even, but it has an audiobook built into it. It doesn't have to connect to the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything like that, but it'll read the book to the kids. So it's kind of like your own personal story time.
Anecdotally, I'd love to just add there too, in Hairston, we've had some of our newcomer kids coming in and using that to help read chapter books. So they'll be, English is their second language, and they'll come in and get the Wonder Book chapter book because it will read aloud to them as they follow along. So that's been something we're trying to get more of the older chapter books in for those kids that are in like grade 5, 6, 7, so that they can keep up with their class curriculum.
And ukuleles?
Yes.
That's an interesting item.
Yes, we got lots. Clifford has the ukuleles. We have the box in our basement, and we rent them out to other branches. We have quite a few, and they're a hit with the kids for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's our collection, and you can always follow up with us at a branch if you have any more questions about any other stuff that's on the list. We also have a number of community partnerships. So promotion and participation in local cultural events. We have outreach to senior residencies across the county as well. We also do outreach to local businesses and organizations. We work closely with the Upper Grand District School Board and the Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health, as well as local historical societies. We also have a number of community rooms throughout the county that you can rent out for public events. Community rooms are available for rentals at Aboyne, Arthur, Clifford, Drayton, Elora, Fergus, Hairston, Hillsburg, Mount Forest, Palmerston, and Post Lynch branches. So yeah, any questions?
Questions? Deputy Mayor Anderson, go ahead.
When we speak about public health, am I correct in remembering that you drop off water samples at the libraries now?
So they can pick up water samples from the
Oh,
library.
Okay,
We did used to have it where they could drop that off as well, but with courier and depending on what location they dropped it off, sometimes it was just under that 24-hour period needed to
Okay.
get back to the public health. But they can pick it up and we can direct them to the closest place where they can drop it off, which
And where-
here in Minto is Palmerston Hospital, I believe.
yeah, all right, thank you.
Other questions? So 14 libraries in Wellington County. There's, even when Erin is finished, there's still going to be 14.
That's right.
So,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you anybody that read the Wellington Advertiser this week, a little bit of controversy on the Erin Library. It's an old grist mill that was purchased a number of years ago by the county, and it's going to be made into a library. It's going to be beautiful. And I mean, I've been to 9 libraries, and they're all absolutely different. I mean, Palmerston and Hairston are both Carnegie, but they're different. And likely Clifford is as different as any. I remember in 2006 when we built that. We insisted that we have I was on council then, and we insisted that we have a doctor's office on the side of it because, I mean, I think the library came out of the doctor's office and they just kind of fit. So we pushed for that. Our mayor was Dave Burns, and it was an interesting time. Question on the fees, though. What's it cost me to rent a book today?
Costs you absolutely nothing if you live in Wellington County system. We don't have overdue fees anymore, which is a really great endeavor for us because it's just, it's nice to know that if people are a day or two late, they aren't going to be fined for that as well. But yeah, if you're a non-resident, it's $120, but everything else will be free.
Isn't that amazing? Go ahead.
I would just like to compliment the libraries. David and I did the tour with Senator Black. It wasn't Senator Black then. Challenged everybody because he was on the library board to go and visit them. So when I was laid up, David held me around in my wheelchair and we went to all of the, checked the accessibility. But the libraries in this county are unparalleled. They are absolutely spectacular. I grew up in libraries. And when I first went into the Fergus one, when it was new, I'm going, okay, libraries weren't like this when I was a kid. I lived on Lock Street in Hamilton, it's a little library, and we still spent half our childhood there. But they had games, and they had computers, and the hotspots, and like anything you can think of. Thank you very much for continuing that service. It is very valued by many of us.
Thank you. We're really grateful for the support we have from county council as well as you guys. And
Yeah, thank you
They're
so
a
much.
real asset to the community, and people need to be more aware of what they can access. And they have no idea if they haven't been to a library recently. They really don't. So having you out here will hopefully spread the word around to some more folks.
the hordes of people watching from home will now be coming.
Yes.
Well, there are, and surprising how many people watch from home, apparently.
Okay, any other questions? So, yeah, so on behalf of council, Rosie, Alicia, thank you for coming. We appreciate you enlightening us on what happens at the library. I mean, we had a great tour of Palmerston and Hairston, and I've been in Clifford, and it's lovely as well. So I agree with Deputy Mayor Anderson. I mean, that's our tax dollars being spent in my opinion, a good way. It brings people out. And I mean, there's a lot of happening things in our libraries. So thank you for coming, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
So our next delegation, and if you guys want to stay or go, this here might interest you. It has to do with the town of Minto's land acknowledgement. And I believe that we have Annie Villick and Martin Cooper today with us, and they're going to be on Zoom. And Mr. Mark Potter is going to enlighten us a bit as well. So who's first?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just by way of introductions, it is my pleasure to introduce Annie Bayou and Martin Cooper from ASI, who will be joining us today virtually to provide information on the Wellington County Municipalities Land Acknowledgement Project.
Should I get going?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi,
Okay,
Annie.
thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to the Minto Council today. We appreciate you coming. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. I didn't mean to jump in here, but thank you for having me. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to present this important project to you today, the Wellington County Municipalities Land Acknowledgement Project. My name is Annie Veilleux. I'm Senior Cultural Heritage Specialist and Manager of the Cultural Heritage Division at ASI. And with me today is Martin Cooper. He's a Senior Associate and the Indigenous Engagement Lead on this project. So he'll be available also with myself to answer questions if you have any. Next slide, please. So Canadian societal perceptions of Indigenous histories are changing, and there is increased appetite to discuss and learn about Indigenous identity within Canada today. In order to move forward with reconciliation as a nation, we need to explore every opportunity to discuss Indigenous culture past and present. Supporting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples' cultural revitalization and integrating Indigenous knowledge systems, oral histories, laws, protocols, and connections to the land into the reconciliation process are essential. Next slide, please. ASI was retained by the chief administrative officers of 6 of the local municipalities in Wellington County to assist in the development of Indigenous land acknowledgements. A land acknowledgement involves making a statement acknowledging the presence of Indigenous peoples, past and present, and recognizing Indigenous traditional lands and treaties. The land acknowledgements can also identify the displacement and exclusion of Indigenous peoples from their traditional territories. Next slide, please. As part of this project, ASI worked with a working group made up of the municipal CAOs. ASI conducted a critical review of land acknowledgements to get an understanding of both the best practices associated with creating and giving land acknowledgements, as well as the criticisms that have been raised regarding this practice. Information was gathered from opinion pieces by Indigenous and non-Indigenous individuals, from existing land acknowledgements, and through ongoing conversation with Indigenous nations and individuals. A review of primary and secondary sources was undertaken to get an understanding of the Indigenous history of the area, as well as an understanding of the treaties covering the municipalities within Wellington County. Research was also conducted with a specific intent to try to identify specific examples of exclusion and displacement that could be recognized in a land acknowledgement. Following the critical review and the background and historical research, individual land acknowledgements were drafted for each of the participating municipalities. Final reporting also included drafting an information booklet for use by staff. It should be noted that a report, information booklet, as well as the land acknowledgements themselves should be considered living documents to be reviewed on a regular basis and updated as needed. Input from Indigenous nations was, of course, integral to the success of the Land Acknowledgement Project, and I will speak to the Indigenous Engagement Program in a few slides. Next slide, please. Land acknowledgements are a traditional Indigenous practice that have been used since time immemorial. They honor, respect, and recognize the nations that live within a given territory. Land acknowledgements originating from settler colonial institutions and governments, however, are more recent, having been around for almost a decade. They have increased in use following the Truth and Reconciliation calls for action. calls to action, sorry. Land acknowledgements have also been the subject of much criticism from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous commentators. Some critics have pointed out that poorly conceived land acknowledgements could have the opposite effect of what they are intended to do. Land acknowledgements are an opportunity for the larger society to state the wrongs of the past and contribute to a feeling of inclusivity and should not be the source of further alienation. It is important that before the creation of a land acknowledgement, serious thought be given to the wrongs committed to Indigenous peoples in the past and how that has continued to the present. This can be done at a local level through historical research and interviewing Indigenous knowledge keepers to reveal specific examples of exclusion and displacement. This information should be included when it is available. A land acknowledgement should not be the culmination of a municipality's attempt at reconciliation, but just a starting point. Once adopted, one should seek opportunities to improve the relationship between non-Indigenous and Indigenous members of the community, as well as ways to reach out and support Indigenous communities. Finally, a land acknowledgement should not be static, but fluid and open to revision. Next slide, please. Indigenous peoples have been living in, traveling through, using the land in this area for thousands of years. It is only relatively recently, in the long history of the area, that the arrival of colonizers and settlers, an alteration of the landscape, disrupted the rhythm of life for the Indigenous groups living in this area. Wellington County is covered by several treaties related to the period of land cessions in southern Ontario. And you can see here on the map. These treaties describe the historical nations with whom the Crown negotiated the transfer of land, and in some cases, the rights that are assured to these nations within these lands. The town of Minto is located within the lands covered by the Nan-Fan Treaty of 1701. In 1701, the Haudenosaunee entered into the Treaty of Fort Albany, or the Nan-Fan Treaty, with the British Crown, where they agreed to place their beaver hunting grounds under the protection of the King of Britain and to reject the French from building forts on their lands, which included most of south central and southwestern Ontario, including Wellington County. The southwest corner of the town of Minto is located within the Huron Tract Purchase, or Treaty 29 of 1827, and the rest of the municipality is located within the Saugeen Tract Purchase, or Treaty 45.5 of 1836, which comprise large tracts of land south and east of Lake Huron. It is located on the treaty lands and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. Next slide, please. Input from Indigenous nations was integral to the success of the Land Acknowledgement Project. The following nations were contacted about the project: Amjawaning First Nation, Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council via the Haudenosaunee Development Institute, Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and 6 Nations of the Grand River Elected Council. Engagement with rights-bearing Indigenous nations as it relates to the Land Acknowledgement Project began in December 2021 with a circulation of a project notice to the nations. The notice described the decision to undertake the project, its goals and timelines, and provided contact information. A project update was circulated in May 2022 to inform the nations that a draft report with draft acknowledgements had been produced, and the draft document was circulated for review and comment. The notice also invited recipients to contact the chair of the working group should they want to discuss the project further or request a meeting. Representatives of the 6 Nations of the Grand River, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation provided written comments in the report. ASI met with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation to discuss technical aspects of the report. Members of the working group in ASI also met with representatives of the 6 Nations of the Grand River on 2 separate occasions. ASI worked with the communities to address concerns and feedback and made revisions to relevant sections of the report. In April 2023, a letter was sent to all the nations again to provide a project update and to circulate an updated report and land acknowledgements. The CAOs of the municipalities involved in this project are committed to continued engagement with identified Indigenous nations with rights and interests in the project. Next slide, please. An information booklet was also drafted as part of this project, which includes a review of practices for putting together a land acknowledgement, but also key considerations when giving a land acknowledgement. So for example, Key considerations include that a land acknowledgement need to come from a non-Indigenous source and should be given by the chair of a meeting or official presiding over an event. It should be a simple sign of respect. A correct pronunciation of names is very important, and one should practice ahead of time to have the correct pronunciation. It can be used for significant events, and it really should be given with thought and meaning to the words, not just read in a rote way. Next slide, please. So the booklet also includes a frequently asked question section. So the FAQ includes questions that may be asked by municipal staff and partners concerning land acknowledgements. This section can be expanded as needed as additional questions are asked. Some of the questions that we address are: what is the purpose of a land acknowledgement? When should one be given? Who should be giving the land acknowledgement? How do I make a land acknowledgement meaningful? What's the difference between traditional territory and treaty lands? What are treaty rights? Or what is Turtle Island? Next slide, please. So the following is the land acknowledgement that was drafted for the town of Minto, and I can read it for you now. The lands we know today as the town of Minto have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the town of Minto, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages on Lake Huron in the Grand River Valley. These nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the town of Minto remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Martin, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to add other than the resolution? Is there questions? Anyone? Councillor Dirksen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had one question. In the actual acknowledgement, it says these nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. And I know that treaty rights were covered in the FAQs, but I'm still not exactly clear what that means and what that could be interpreted to mean. And I'm wondering if maybe our guests could help us out with that.
Okay, Marty, if you could answer that question a bit.
Well, treaty rights include, well, right now the provincial policy statement requires municipalities to engage with First Nations on any kind of planning endeavors, master plans, and official plans. So that that would be included in treaty rights. But the other thing is that they have certain rights to harvesting and collecting, not on private land, but on public land. For instance, crown land that might be in the municipality. I'm not sure if there is any in Minto, but that's one of the treaty rights that they uphold. But mainly being engaged on any kind of planning issues.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a big thank you to our friends from ASI for the presentation and the report today. The staff report before Council provides a summary of some of the information presented by ASI and recommendations on including the land acknowledgement statement. There are no set rules guiding when a land acknowledgement should be given, as long as the land acknowledgement is given in a meaningful way and not simply recited out of routine or a matter of process. Staff are recommending the land acknowledgement be included at inaugural meetings of Council, official meetings with Indigenous nations, and formal unveilings and ceremonies. The land acknowledgement can also be placed at the beginning of important documents, such as strategic plans and master plans. The full report from ASI, including the information booklet, is included as an attachment to this report.
Okay. Any other questions for Annie or Marty? Go ahead, Councillor Dirksen.
Not a question, but I found the document to be a really interesting history lesson of the area, and I'm definitely going to be setting that aside and saving it, it's not going to get lost in a council package where it sits right now. So I'm going to pull it out and separate it out because I found it quite interesting, and I'll be reading it again. I just thought the research in it was really well done. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you for that feedback.
Okay. So the resolution recommendation is moved by Councillor Zimmerman, seconded by Councillor Gunson, that the Council of the Town of Minto receives report CAO 2023-004 regarding the Town of Minto Indigenous Land Acknowledgement, and that the Council of the Town of Minto approves the use of the land acknowledgement as outlined in the report CAO 2023-004. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Yes, I would like to add my thanks as well on behalf of council for working with our CAOs from our county. And I know that this has been kind of ongoing for a little while, but I'm glad that we have finally brought it to a head, and we now know exactly where we're going and what we're doing in reference to land acknowledgement. So again, thank you very much to you two folks and to our CAO. So if there's nothing further, you guys have a nice day.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a
Thanks
great
lot.
day. Bye.
Okay, so public question period. Oh, so would you mind going to the mic, please? What a perfect segue.
Will that booklet with the history and the background be available for the public as well? Is it in the minutes online currently, or?
It is currently on the agenda online.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. So we are going to move on to correspondence received for information or requiring direction of council. Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Dirksen, that the council receive the correspondence as information. Any one of those 5 items you want to talk about, pull out, discuss? Go ahead. Deputy Mayor Anderson?
Thank you. Just the letter about the ambulance delays. Problem is becoming increasingly severe across our area as well as Essex. I worked this past weekend in the emergency department, and Guelph Emerge was totally out of commission. They were down 50% of their staff. Ambulances were lined up, so the other ambulances were asked to call in. We don't have a code black in Guelph, but it means that there's absolutely no ambulance availability throughout the area, but we don't define that. We limit it to a code red. But it is becoming a more and more concerning, and the talk about, like, nobody has an answer for it. The basic problem is lack of primary care, and we know that we're struggling with that. People can't get to a family doctor. The walking clinic is no longer a walking clinic. It's an appointment-only clinic, and we're hearing that every time we have people coming in. There's just nowhere for them to access care, so they come to the emergency department, and it totally overwhelms the services that we have available. So I don't know that we have, but it's something we need to keep on our radar. And I know we work hard to recruit, but so is everybody else, and there isn't a lot of luck happening. They're not wanting to come up to rural areas and start their own offices and run their own businesses. So it's an alarming situation. It's becoming more and more alarming as our towns grow and our facilities, healthcare facilities, and doctor availability is not.
Thank you very much. I do know that this issue has been talked about at county council meetings numerous times. And I agree, there hasn't been a lot, they haven't been successful in overcoming the problem. I know that it has been worked on, but we have Deputy Mayor Anderson right involved in it, telling us that there's a problem. I'm not sure where we can go with this. Do we, as the town of Minto, do we send a letter to, I'm sure Mr. Ford knows, but you know, does the squeaky wheel get the grease? I don't know, but go ahead,
If I
Deputy Mayor
might
Anderson.
speak, we've talked about it here previously. I think we really need to foster that idea of an NP-led clinic and the fact that NPs need to be able to roster patients because they go into a clinic and they roster under the physician. So it's two people seeing the same number of people that the physician could see on their own. So it doesn't help at all. So we could perhaps lobby the Minister of Health or Mr. Ford in regards to that, because in Harrison here, once Dr. Clarko retires or leaves, there will be no direct access for people in Harrison. They will have to afford or find transportation to Palmerston. They don't have any family members. They're paying a taxi. Taxi is $25 plus each way. If they have to have lab work, we're a sessional lab. We're not available 24 hours or even 5 days a week. So then they may have to have a trip back, which could be $100, $150 out of their $800 defined seniors allowance or whatever. It's an impossible situation for our senior citizens on fixed incomes. We just really need to find some sort of solution. And I think if we promote, we have the space in the clinic. There's funding available right now. I think we have to do some work around. Do they need a secretary? And I think they could do the scheduling in Palmerston at the main unit health team, and then have an NP see people in our building that we've already built in town for healthcare. But I think it's essential for our senior citizens to have some sort of access within town. They shouldn't have to rely on a clinic that's 15, 20 miles away or 15, 20 minutes away when transportation is also an issue in our rural areas. Not that I'm passionate about the issue at all. But I see a dire emergency coming forward and we need to do something to meet the needs of our community.
So I do know that the doctor recruitment committee is working diligently on this. The letters have been sent in reference to the NPs and trying to recruit full-time doctors. I know that they're working hard. So if there's something else that we can do, something that you have in mind?
I just think a letter of support. I know
Okay.
that the recruitment committee has been looking at it and they're looking at that funding, but I think maybe if we had a group to sort of work strategically to figure out what's the best way to utilize that if we got accepted, or how to make it financially feasible. And it may come down to, as you read more and more documents, that the town has to put some funding into actually providing healthcare. And I know that's not a concept that's popular, but I think it's becoming reality.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I know of one other municipality that has put a little money forward. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's not on deaf ears. I know that there's people working on this as we speak, but certainly a letter would not hurt. So,
Through you, Mayor Turton, we did do letters of support back in June 6th of 2023 in order for them to apply for funding for these nurse practitioners. So I haven't heard back on whether those have been successful or when they will even hear on their success at all. So is this something that we wanted to look at once we hear back, or is this, what are you wanting to do with this, if I may ask?
so why don't we talk with the group that we sent the letter to, find out where they're at, and ask them if we can support.
Sure.
Because realistically, I don't believe that there's any need for duplication. So, okay, Clerk McRobb?
Thank you.
So we're not going to pull that. We've already supported that, and I mean it's pretty huge. So I believe that I already read the recommendation for those 5 items. Correspondence. All in favor of the correspondence? That's carried. Thank you. So we have reports from committees. Committee minutes for approval. We'll ask Mr. Paul Judge to talk about the Minto Trails Committee. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. I'll step right up here. Good afternoon, Mayor Turton and members of council. It's been a while here. I'll try to be brief. It's no fancy slides or graphics to aid me along here. We just met at the end of May, so these are the minutes from our Trails Committee meeting. Just kind of an inaugural meeting for the new representatives from council. So that was one of the items on our agenda at that meeting too, was just to introduce both councillors Dirksen and Zimmerman to the Trails Committee, so they're replacing Mark McKenzie, who was our representative from council for the last term. We also had Christine Wanless came forward to fill a vacancy on the committee as a representative from Palmerston. I did a brief staff report just at that stage, some of the things that we were doing routinely as cleanup and maintenance on the trails, things that come up cyclically in the spring, and updated them on a few other opportunities that would be coming up where we'd be looking for their input. So one of the things, again, is looking long range, but there's a team of staff and some input from outside the municipality who are looking to develop a plan for the fairgrounds and the Harrison Arena area. So at some point, just given that the trails abut that and the property beyond the river at Conservation Park is part of that the committee maybe sought for some of their input there. So that just kind of a take home and something for them to bring back to other meetings going forward. Another item that's been discussed a little bit, given that we've got some new representation on the committee, both from the public and from council, we're going to revisit the potential of this property swap with the Darcy family at the third line by doing another site visit there just to update some of the new members there. And there was a good suggestion that perhaps it doesn't need to be a recommendation exclusively in favor or opposing, but that we could develop some stipulations or some specs around how that rehabilitation is done, and that could influence whether the committee supports or opposes that transaction. We discussed potentially doing a planting at the trail in town in Clifford, so the properties that are on Ann Street and they back onto the walking trail there. We chose to do our next meeting as a site visit there, so that will come up in the minutes of the following meeting. I think that was the bulk of that meeting in April, so happy to take some questions if folks have that.
Councillor Elliott, go ahead.
Paul, what would be the advantage of making a swap in land? Would it be a better trail to use, or what would be
Yeah, it might be difficult to illustrate here. I know graphically it's nice we've got the maps to share, but the property that is adjacent to us is currently a gravel pit that will need to be rehabilitated, and it isn't a nice clear straight line down adjacent to the trail. There's a section that jogs over, runs parallel again, and then jogs back that was a siding, and it's for the town has been a bit of a liability issue just in the activities that go on there. The Darcys currently own a section that makes a triangle in the swamp, essentially, that is at the back of their property and also adjacent to the current trail that comes out of town. So it's landlocked to them. It's not of use to them, but there's the advantage to us, or potential advantage to us, is going forward as development grows out of Palmerston, that the infrastructure for the trail bed itself is already there. It would require clearing the tree corridor and developing some new trails, but given that the population will be expanding, there may be advantage to long range developing some further trails there, that some of that residential could have other avenues onto and some enhanced loops through those trails.
Other questions? Go ahead. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Hi, Paul. Nice to see you here. And thank you for all your hard work around the towns, because again, the flowers and growth is fabulous. I know that's nothing to do with this, but just curious about the trails. Are we having any issues this year with vandalism, or are they being pretty well used? I see they're being used a lot. I certainly see people parked at the end of by our place there all the time and walking on it, but
yeah, typically there's probably the hot spot is coming out of Palmerston, just because it's easy access for a larger population and that. And not that I'm aware of anything substantial. We've had some spray painting, some fires, some trees broken, that kind of thing is kind of par for the course.
You just wonder, right? We've seen some other increases in the parks and things, and you just
Yeah, and I mean, I've
Hadn't
had,
heard anything, so I figured it was probably pretty good, so.
had that discussion with other members of staff too, is as much as that frustrates you, you have to step back and listen to the reports you hear on the radio. Everywhere deals with that as
Yeah.
much as us. So it's just the
Fair
nature of
enough.
the beast. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions? Appreciate it, Paul, and congratulations to Paul Zimmerman for taking on the chair role of this very important committee. Where are we here? So, recommendation moved by Councillor Potnovitz, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the council receives the Minto Trail Committee minutes of May 31st, 2023 for information and approves any recommendations contained therein. All in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next item is staff reports, and Belinda, Countryside Midwifery Services. Would you enlighten us on this, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Turton, members of council. Just a quick signage grant report here. We've kept our ECDAV committee busy over the summer with electronic voting, as we don't want to delay anyone. As you're aware, the Countryside Midwives moved into the Harrison Lyons Medical Clinic in July, and as a result needed some new signage. That's what this is for. This is the door sign as well as the sign in the white at the top. The total cost was $2,199.79 plus HST, so that qualifies for the maximum $1,000 grant, which still leaves, if approved, just over $60,000 in this year's budget. So although we've approved a lot of grants, they've been relatively small signage grants so far. So we're recommending, it was voted on, unanimously approved, so we're recommending the $1,000 grant.
Questions? Okay, moved by Councillor Gunson, second by Councillor Zimmerman, that the Council of the Town of Minto receives the report ACTEV 2023-019 regarding the signage grant number H32 Countryside Midwifery Services and approves signage grant number H32 for 16 John Street, Unit A, Hairston for $1,000. Questions? All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Belinda. The next item, we'll ask Ashley to report on it. It's the Right Haven Homes Draft Plan of Common Elements Condominium 182 Bridge Crescent, Palmerston. Thank you, Ashley.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Turton. So as mentioned, this is regarding 182 Bridge Crescent in the Creekbank Meadows subdivision. So this is regarding a 10-unit stacked townhome development by Right Haven Homes. Construction is currently in progress, and each of these 10 units will also have an additional dwelling unit on the lower level. The purpose of that additional dwelling unit is to provide more attainable housing options in Palmerston by both increasing the local rental supply with the lower level unit and allowing the homeowner of the upper level to have a rental income, making their unit more attainable as well. So the purpose of this draft plan of condominium is to establish a private internal road network, servicing, and landscaped areas for these stacked townhomes. A part lot control application will be brought back before council once the condominium portion is approved by the county to create 10 parcels of tied land so that each condominium unit can be sold with distinct and separate ownership. The county has circulated all the required agencies, and the town has worked with the county to formulate all the conditions set out in Schedule 1 of the county's report. So there's just a rendering of what it's going to look like when it's finished, as well as the progress right now. Once it's endorsed by our town council, the draft plan and the conditions then go to the Director of Planning and Development at the county for their sign off, and then the onus is on the developer to clear the conditions and enter into a condominium agreement, which will be brought back before council at a later date once all of the conditions are addressed. As a structure would exist regardless of the condominium plan, this really is more of a technicality, and the conditions include standard items such as that a condominium agreement is entered into, and this is where you look at the roads, the signage, service, waste disposal systems, drainage, all of those provisions. We've also asked that a landscape plan be provided. Well, we can't ask for that under site plan control anymore, and 10 units or less is now exempt. We can still ask for it under the plan of condominium, and they'll also have to ensure compliance with the zoning bylaw, which we have reviewed at the building permit stage already. And yeah, I'm here if you have any questions.
Questions for Ashley? Go ahead. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
I just have a question. It has nothing to do with this exactly, but are those homes, is there an apartment down below? And then do the people have to go upstairs to get into the main part of the house?
Yes, so they're not a basement unit per se, but you go down roughly 5 steps. So when you walk into the main entry, you can go either up 5 steps or down. So the
Okay.
down's a 1-bedroom like apartment,
Yeah.
and it has in-unit laundry, and you can also access the rear yard. And then if you go up, it's a 3-bedroom townhouse up above. So the lower unit's roughly 550 square feet, and then the upper unit's roughly 1,800 with the 2 floors.
And would people, if they bought that, they'd be able to use both units if they wanted to? Or there's no stipulation saying they have to use that basement as extra housing accommodation for people?
No, they don't have to, but yeah, it's
Hopefully
set
they
up
will.
for that, yeah. Yeah, otherwise it would just be an apartment sitting empty, so.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So the stacked townhouses, we got the apartment in the basement, 1,800 square feet up top. So the owner is purchasing it, and I think, what is there, how many in the one stacked? Is there 5?
Yeah, so there's 5 on each side of the road, so there'll be 10
So
total.
we'll have 5 apartments, and we'll have 5 separate owners.
10 total. So there's 20 units.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. There's 20 units, yeah. So that's a really good situation for the owner to have an apartment in the basement, and it's good for our town to have another number of apartments coming on for people to rent. So today, I mean, we're basically agreeing to driveways and lawns and things like that.
2 conditions surrounding that, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody understand that? Go ahead, Councillor Dirksen.
Yeah, I think I understand it, but just wanted to clarify something because you had said 20 owners. It's actually 10 owners, but 20 units.
20
That means
units, yeah.
20 places people could live,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
But it would be 10 owners.
Yep. Just from talking with the developer, his whole goal is to provide more rental housing where he can. So that's been his intent with this block this entire time. And from what I can see, they're more geared to younger families starting out.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, or they'd be great for multi-generational
Yeah, for sure.
situations, that kind of thing. Okay, super, thanks.
Councillor Elliott.
The cost, is it affordable for somebody to buy that? And then the rent would bring it back to what, so you'd have to have a fairly good down payment. Is it a lot more than buying a townhouse?
It's actually priced a little bit less than the freehold towns. They're aiming around the 600 mark. So when you factor in the rental income, I think it is a more attainable option for sure.
And is there a set rental, or would they get their heat and hydro? How's that work? How does that, the renter has separate?
They've purchased water meters for each unit, so my understanding is that the renter would be responsible for the water usage. I'm not sure about hydro and that kind of servicing. That may be up to just who purchases it, but
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, there could be 5 different contracts for the renters in that building.
yes, yeah, it'll be based on
So-
each owner.
But yeah, it's you know, if 600,000 is a reasonable number, you know, and you know, somewhere between 1 bedroom in the basement. It is now. Right? 1 bedroom. So I mean, it's an opportunity. So no other questions? Is there other questions? So the recommendation is moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Podnimitz, that the Council of the Town of Minto recommends approval to the County of Wellington regarding draft plan of condominium 23 CD-2302, subject to the conditions set out in Schedule 1 of the County of Wellington's staff report, and further that the Council of the Town of Minto endorses draft plan of condominium 23 CD-23002 with Town of Minto staff advising the County of Wellington of Council's decision. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Next one then is the Braymark Homes, the Heinmiller Access Agreement. And Ashley, please proceed.
Perfect, thank you. So this property is located at 65 Lawrence Street in Palmerston, just shown on the image up on the screen there, and it's just off of Main Street. So council will recall the Braymark and Heinmiller property coming before them previously regarding the severance of the residentially developable portion of land from the future development portion. As a condition of that approval of severance, an access agreement is required to be entered into, which essentially protects the Heinmiller lands that the developer is not currently purchasing so that Heinmiller lands retain access to an open public street after the severance is complete and when the lands are developed as a subdivision. So it also outlines provisions regarding a new field entrance for farm equipment, the financial responsibilities of the owner and developer, provisions for construction access, which will be farther covered in a subdivision agreement, and the conveyance of any required land. So town staff have been working with all involved parties, and we're satisfied that this access agreement protects the interests of everyone involved. So we are recommending that council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign on behalf of the town. Further details regarding the actual development of the land will occur during the subdivision process. This proponent simply to address access for the condition of consent. There are also no financial implications for the town. All costs pertaining to any required driveway relocation or reconfiguration, legal costs, registrations, etc., are solely to be paid by the developers. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Yeah. That little blue thing that's conveyed to the town, how does that work when we get that part of the land?
Yes, so essentially we're getting that piece of land so that the red portion at the back isn't landlocked when the severance is complete. So if the subdivision goes ahead or if it doesn't, then that landowner still has legal frontage onto an open public road. There are provisions in there that when the subdivision gets developed and as that retained portion gets different access, we will give the land back. But right now it'll be held by us.
Is there any thought of when or if they're going to start the work on that, or?
So at the next council meeting, you'll be seeing a public meeting for the zoning of that subdivision come forward. And then likely sometime in October, you'll be seeing a red line amendment come to you. For phase one, sorry. That's phase two of the subdivision. So phase one's at the beginning, but
Sure.
yes, they are working towards it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Springtime, yeah. So,
Do you want to speak on timelines?
just,
They're working towards it. The ball's in their park, in their park when they actually start putting the infrastructure in the ground for phase one. Phase two, we haven't even seen a conceptual plan, so I don't know where they're at in terms of the development of that. So phase two will be the yellow portion.
thanks.
Other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Councillor Podnitz.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I'm assuming there'll be more than one access to this property. Is it coming off of Main Street as well?
So there is a proposed access on Ontario Street there. Mary Street for phase one is going to be a secondary access just for emergency purposes, essentially. And then we are exploring other options for when phase two comes online.
Other questions? So I know that we've talked about this entrance a little bit, and I mean, years from now, possibility of it being very busy. So I think that's a good question, good discussion to have. And I know we've had discussions about it with the new Main Street in Palmerston. It's going to happen in 3 or 4 years. So
Through you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Turton. Could I make a suggestion that we shorten this motion slightly?
sure.
And I could read that out on your behalf, if you're okay with that?
Is there any other questions? If not, I'll have to read this motion. So thank you. Go ahead.
That council of the town of Minto receives plan 2023-003 regarding Braymark Homes High-Miller Access Agreement 65 Lawrence Street, Palmerston for information, and further that Braymark Homes and Barry High-Miller execute with the town of Minto the access agreement, and further that the council considers passing a bylaw in open session authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the access agreement.
So we have mover Councillor Dirksen, second by Councillor Zimmerman. Are you two folks okay with that new resolution?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody understand the motion? All in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Ashley. I believe that there's one more. Has to do with the Ross surplus farm dwelling severance. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I have two more.
Oh, you do have two, Mayor? Oh, sorry. No, it's not bad news. It's good news. So.
Okay, so the staff report is regarding a surplus farm dwelling severance for Wendy and Gary Ross on the third line. So they are proposing to sever 1.8 acres with their existing single detached dwelling and shed from the farmland with an existing agricultural use. Severances are permitted under the provincial policy statement and County of Wellington official plan for residences surplus to farming operations, and the intent is to allow farmers to reduce their costs of acquiring additional farmlands where the impact on existing and future farm operations can be kept to a minimum. So the severed lot, once on its own, will be considered a reduced agricultural lot, and it proposes to meet all the required zoning provisions. And as a standard, the retained lot will be required to be rezoned to prohibit residential development. Being that it's close to the urban boundary and zoned as A1, it'll essentially be limited to cash cropping, but that's the existing use of the farm as it is. Standard conditions apply, and that includes also a new drainage assessment schedule be completed and that there's satisfactory access for both parcels, which both appear to be existing. So we are recommending that council recommends to the Land Division Committee at the county to approve the consent with the conditions the town has recommended included.
Questions? Councillor Potnitz.
Yes, through you, Mayor Turton. Is there a maximum acreage size for surplus farm dwelling severances?
They generally ask that it be kept to a minimum. And I did touch base with the county, and being the existing layout, they're not going to be asking for a reduction there at all. Generally, we see them around the 1 to 2 acre mark.
Other questions? So what is the biggest reason why the farmer would do this? What is it an advantage? You know, you have more control. You have two pieces of property. You can sell one if you want or whatever. But what is the real advantage of doing this?
That seems to be, that they're each individualized. I will say a lot of times you'll see farmers list the residence and hold on to the farmland, but it could go either way, to be honest. It just depends what they're looking for.
Okay. Any other questions? So recommendation moved by Councillor Benson, seconded by Councillor Elliott, that the Council of the Town of Minto recommends the County of Wellington Land Division Committee approve consent application B5123, Gary and Wendy Ross for the land legally described as Concession 2, Part Lot 24, with a municipal address of 5995933, third line in Town of Minto, and the following conditions be considered. And if it's okay with everyone, I'm not going to read those conditions. I'm going to, if anybody has problems with that, I will read them, but I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you very much. Ashley, there's one more. Would you, it's the Cobblestone Diversions, Inc., Cameron Gerber in Palmerston at 490 Raglan Street. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. Thank you. So this report's regarding an urban infill lot severance at 420 Raglan. So it's right on the corner of Raglan and Cumberland and just adjacent to Norwell. So the proposal is to sever 0.09 acres of vacant residential land and to retain 0.15 acres with the existing dwelling. As I've noted on the image there, that garage on the back portion will be removed, both to provide for a bit more rear yard space as well as parking if necessary. Town staff are of the opinion that the intent of the provincial policy statement and the county official plan are generally met with the proposal. Further, the existing zoning of the lot is residential, and based on the proposed size of the lot and required zoning provisions, a single detached would be permitted. They could, with that zoning, go up to a townhouse, but reasonably speaking, there's not enough space there for anything beyond a single from what we have seen. So the owner is not asking for anything site-specific or any zoning relief to accomplish the severance. Conditions include that the owner confirms they're aware that a grading, drainage, and servicing plan is required to be approved by the town prior to a building permit being issued. The parkland fee will have to be paid, accounts in good standing, satisfactory access, and there is a few conditions there, but primarily they're just to do with that the owner is aware of the servicing process requirements to be followed, and all costs are to be paid solely by the developer. The town staff are recommending that council recommends to the Land Division Committee of the county to approve the consent with the conditions that we have outlined in the report.
Any questions for Ashley on this item? Today, we're voting on a severance only. That's pretty well it, correct?
Yeah, just, yeah, for the conditions.
So size of the lot is in question, I guess, and when it comes time for him to put a building or she to put a building on it, it comes back to us, and through the site plan, we talk about it then.
So it won't be coming back before council. This is just to sever the lot unless they need any site-specific relief, which they're not proposing. So they've sketched out a rough building area, and it should reasonably fit a single detached dwelling. They're not proposing any reductions to setbacks or anything like that. Yeah, it's shown on the site sketch there.
Any questions? Hearing none. Moved by Councillor Potnovich, second by Councillor Dirksen, that the Council of Town of Minto recommends to the County of Wellington Land Division Committee approve consent application B5823, Cobblestone Diversions, Inc., care of Cameron Gerber, with a municipal address of 420 Raglan Street in the town of Palmerston, and the following conditions be considered. Again, I'm not going to read these 8 conditions. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ashley. The next item is the Royal Terrace Long-Term Care Home, Palmerston, 600 Whites Road, and Mr. Kuipers is going to take us through this.
Thank you, Mayor Turton. And I must say this project is kind of a long time coming. We've been working with the owner and their professionals for about 2 years now. The reason for the delay was not on behalf of the owner or the town. As seen in my report, there was a funding gap from when they initially applied for the funding to the actual COVID construction numbers, which had a large gap in what was affordable at that time. So that caused the delay. But as mentioned, my report is on a site plan approval application for Royal Terrace. As you all know, is located within the Palmerston urban boundary on Whites Road. The site is roughly 7.56 acres, which, as you saw in the previous aerial photo, is less than 50% developed. So there's a large swath of land available for this addition. The current facility contains 67 long-term care beds, as well as 50 retirement home beds, which the original building was constructed, I believe, in the early 90s. This application is for an approximately 70,000 square foot, 99 long-term bed addition to the existing building. So that is kind of the darker portion to the right of the screen there. The proposal also includes provisions to convert the existing building from both a mixed long-term care and retirement home to an 80-bed retirement home facility. So they're going to renovate the existing. As well as what you'll see at the top of the image there, a series of street or cluster townhouse buildings. These are not part of the approval for this site plan approval application. They're shown for the purposes of ensuring that servicing in the future is adequately accommodated now. They'll have to come back for a site plan approval amendment to facilitate that component of the design. The proposed addition is completely sprinklered, brick cladded, and includes 122 parking spaces. There's the entrance to the new long-term care portion of the building. Includes additional fire hydrants and stormwater infiltration chambers. The owner's proposing an attractive addition with an internal design of more of a residential feel opposed to institutional. As you all know, Cash is picky on his facilities and likes to go above and beyond what a minimum facility style would be, which is awesome. Upon completion of the addition and the renovation to the existing building, he is anticipating another 50 employees needed to work on the site. One thing that you may have read in the agreement itself was that council accelerated the reconstruction of the Whites Road project. When we initially were talking about this, well prior to his application, it was determined that the services on Whites Road were not adequate for this proposal. So council accelerated that redevelopment in conjunction with the county to allow this project to go ahead when it's ready. As such, council or the town incurred about a little under 185,000 worth of upgrades that we did to the road to allow this. So in the agreement, there are provisions for collecting that hard cost. Not anything inflated beyond the actual construction numbers, but what the construction numbers were at the time. So normally in my reports, I don't include any building permit or development charge costs that a project will contribute to the town. I know Belinda does for our industrial park, but that's more to demonstrate our infrastructure cost to create those lots are higher than what we're selling them for. This is kind of different. However, what I just wanted to point out with the numbers I put in the report is the Bill 109 implications on the town. So Bill 109 froze development charges for a period of up to 2 years from either a rezoning application or a site plan application. So if the building permit for this addition is issued prior to September 30th, the reduction in what the owner has to pay to the town is roughly 185,000. That's what the 21 rates, or what the increase from the 21 rates are to current rates. So with that, the town is not necessarily out, but frozen out of 126,000 in development charges alone. What the increase in development charges are the calculated increase of project costs. So although the same projects are on the books, 21 to currently, the anticipated cost for those projects, based on the square footage that this one's contributing, went up 126,000 from that point. So essentially, that when we endeavor in those costs, we're going to have to come up with 126,000 that these DCs didn't contribute, which, as you all know, is about a 2% tax increase. So that's the implication that Bill 109 has on us. It's not strictly limited to this project. In my opinion, this is a significant project, so the numbers are, you know, a lot bigger picture than what some of the other ones are. So I just wanted to emphasize it in this cost, or in this project, sorry. The other thing I'd like to mention is that Bill 109 also delegated the authority to approve site plan approval applications to myself. But being this predates the parameters in Bill 109, it actually bumps back to you guys to both approve it as well as to authorize the mayor and the clerk to enter into the agreement with the owner. So that's why this one's a little bit different, and the recommendation's a little bit different than the CREED Act one. I believe that is all I wanted to mention, but I'm open to any questions you may have.
Questions for CPO? Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Turton. Terry, just that the future expansion, I think you mentioned the townhouse type development. They're going to be more for independent seniors living?
That's correct. What the owner's plan with this entire facility would be that independent persons can live in the street or cluster townhouses. That aspect, whether we own that road or not, hasn't been established to date. Once those persons need additional assistance, then they could transition to the retirement home side. And if they need additional assistance beyond that, transition to the long-term care. So it's kind of a 3-step process all in one development.
I like that concept. It gives them more independence.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you. So I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this or not, but does he have a partner? I mean, Cash is of a significant age himself, and this is a pretty ambitious project.
The only thing,
Start down the road, and then what happens?
the only thing I can say, it's owned by a corporation.
Okay.
I am not aware and have never looked at any interested parties as part of that corporation. So
It's just like, what happens if we do all this and we start and it gets stopped halfway and it's just there?
Yes.
Because I don't know if the allowances and the money, well, possibly they will, but it depends on whether the money from the government was just awarded to cash per se, or is it transferable if we're halfway through the project?
It would have been awarded to the owner itself.
Yeah.
So if there is a change in ownership, I would believe that that funding would go with that corporation.
Okay. It's just, I mean, it would be a great asset. It's a wonderful thing if it comes to fruition. Big project.
It's a very expensive project, yes.
Other questions? Terry, how different is the stormwater infiltration chamber than what we're used to?
So significantly different. We have never come across a product like this previously. It has been used in other municipalities, but essentially opposed to having a stormwater management pond with an outlet. This, ironically, it's in the bottom right-hand corner underneath the parking lot. It essentially directs the stormwater into these large chambers to infiltrate into the ground naturally. I went through the numbers myself because, again, first time I came across them, and it all pencils out based on the percolation of the soil. So it's kind of unique. This was a challenging site, being they would have to cross, or their only potential outlet, would have to cross the adjacent property to the creek that runs down there. And then there's easements and maintenance and who does what and why and in the future. So this is what they opted to explore in lieu of the pond and outlet.
That sounds interesting.
Mhm.
It does.
Yep.
So the $184,000 that we're talking about, and with this site control application, there's a bit of a hurry up here, correct?
Not on my part, but
No.
being that the owner would have to carve that bigger check, I would assume so from that end. The building permit we've had in the queue and reviewed for a year and a half now. Just things were going really quickly, and then suddenly the funding gap raised its ugly head, and then the brakes got kind of put on. So once cash is ready to reimburse the town for the additional costs we incurred on White's Road and sign the agreement, we can kick the permit that same day.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, so the recommendation is that moved by Councillor Zimmerman, second by Councillor Elliott. The Council of the Town of Minto receives the report Plan 2023-036 for SPC 2021-09, the Royal Terrace regarding a site control application for a 99-bed long-term care home addition, and approves the site plan control application. Further, passes a bylaw authorizing the mayor and the clerk to enter into a site plan agreement with the owner. All in favor of this motion? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. So, the second quarter financial review, we'll ask our treasurer to give us the good news. And I maybe pass the chair over to Councillor Dirksen. Sorry about that. I apologize.
No problem. Finish off this part of the meeting with the second quarter financial review, and I'll pass it over to our treasurer, Gordon Duff, to take us through that report, please.
Great. Thanks, Chair Dirksen. So this is just kind of a look at where are we halfway through the year. Just high level, theoretically, we've spent 50% of our money and taken in 50% of our revenue. And the actual figures are remarkably close to that. Normally things don't work out quite so evenly, but they have this year. So maybe that means we're into more of a bit more of a normal activity year. So we had spent roughly 46.5% of our $10.9 million expenditures, and our revenue is about 48.5% of the 4.8 for taxes and that. And non-tax, which basically for us means water and wastewater, we're about 41.5%, and revenues right on at 50.6. We've had our 2 interim tax installments. Bills will be going out soon for the September due date. Just kind of interesting, as you may recall, our tax arrears actually dipped during the worst of the COVID shutdowns, and they are sneaking up a bit. There's certainly nothing to worry about, but I think that's just an indication of life coming back to normal, and on the negative side, inflation and people's pockets are stretched, that's for sure. So the tables show historical and also comparison of 2023 budget. I think most things look quite reasonable. I think the admin revenue is a bit optimistic. I think that's timing differences on things like solar panel revenue, where the money is more of a flow through. It comes in and then it goes out, and sometimes the bills to return to the equipment suppliers is delayed, and I think that's kind of what's going on here. But as I say, everything else looks pretty much in line. I think our energy costs are maybe a bit higher than they were at the worst of the COVID shutdowns, but they're still in line with what we experienced in prior years too. So so far so good on the operating front. Capital, by the end of June, a lot's going on. Not necessarily all the billings have caught up. We've been working away diligently on our computer hardware and software replacements. Fires had the pager project going on, and we're also trying to build our redundancy at our water towers with our generators. And just heard this morning that the natural gas is getting tapped into them. So that's going on. A lot of our paving and hardtop has started at the end of June. The site lane project, I believe, is just going on right now, so not too many expenditures. The big project is the Palmerston Clarifier, and by the end of June, I think all the big work was done. They're just fine-tuning the implementation. It's also purchased most of our replacement pickup trucks and service vehicles. SCADA work is going on, which is basically computers for water and wastewater. The new well, not too much has been spent, more just engineering by the end of June, but that physical work is actually going on all through the summer. And we're doing the final work on the Palmerston Arena renovations, getting a badly needed kitchen should be up and running for the fall events. And we've had, again, some buybacks of land in Palmerston Industrial Park, but I'm sure we'll be having sales in the future. So I'm happy to take any questions or anything.
Does anyone have any questions for Treasurer Duff? Mayor Turton?
Chair, so toward the solar panels, the price of, so it was a 20-year contract?
20 years, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So we're tied into that 20-year contract with no changes in revenue?
Not really, no. We were kind of tied with what we have, and there's also provisions that if say we had to replace the roof next door or something, we would have to compensate for that. So far, things have gone relatively well. You may see the Sun Saver people up occasionally to check on things, and they monitor it remotely. Again, because it's solar panels. If the sun's shining, it's making electricity. If it's overcast and cold, not so much. So it's interesting to see the seasonal variations depending on the hours of sunlight, for sure. But
I guess my thought was, 20-year contract, the price of kilowatts per kilowatt is certainly not the same as what we.
No. Well, yes, as you know, that price fluctuates greatly, but under, I guess it was the Fit For program, those rates are set all in those agreements.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll read the recommendation. The Council of the Town of Minto, moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Podnowitz. That the Council of the Town of Minto receives report Finance 2023-011 regarding the 2023 second quarter financial review. All in favor? Thank you, that carries, and I'll pass the chair back to Mayor
Thank you.
Turton.
And we are at announcements. So do you want to start, Councillor Elliott?
Sure, just wondering what's happening with White's Road in Palmerston. It's one of the questions I might have, but you know, Chris, when they're gonna go about fixing that.
They cut it and they were waiting for it to settle some more, and they did some packing work, so then they left it open for a month to let it settle and be good. So the paving is scheduled to go this week.
Oh.
To pave it, but not just, again, the base coat.
Yeah.
Top coat might not get done this year. They might wait till next year to ensure that it's not going to heave again on them. So
Glad I asked.
So should be this week, weather dependent.
Councillor Gunson?
I have nothing.
Go ahead.
Nothing for me.
So I just had a couple things. I'd like to, on behalf of the council and staff, offer our condolences to Derek Thompson. As everybody is aware, he lost his dad. And we certainly send our condolences to the Thompson family and wish them all the best. So, second item is the Upper Canada two-cylinder John Deere show in Palmerston. It was really well represented, and it was really well received from our community. The committee had talked to the Upper Canada two-cylinder club, and they were extremely pleased with Minto, especially Palmerston. Our staff was second to none. They did a lot of great things, and that committee was extremely pleased with how Palmerston received them and supported them, and they're looking to bigger and better things next year. I know there was 4 downtown stores, groups supported them in their dress-up competition at their storefronts and such like, and they're looking next year to make that 8 or 12, whatever. But anyway, our friend Mr. Craig wants to come sometime and talk to us about it, possibly September or October. So that was a very positive weekend. It was the weather was good and it was well. People got out and enjoyed themselves. The last item is the Mayor's Golf Tournament, which is this Thursday. We're talking about some great weather for Thursday, and I'd like to thank our staff again for working so diligently, Quinn and Tanya, and whoever else helped you guys. I'm looking forward to a good day. Anyone that's interested in coming for dinner that is not going to be golfing, that invitation is still out there, Quinn? I would think. And
No, it isn't.
It is now.
yes, it is. Yeah.
Could you ask?
Okay, so if there's nothing else, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Gunson, that the council or the committee of the whole convene into regular council. All in favor? That's carried. Any notices of motion? Seeing none, I've got a resolution moved by Councillor Zimmerman, seconded by Councillor Dirksen, that the Council of the Town of Minto ratifies the motions made in the committee of the whole. All in favor of that motion? It's carried. Thank you. Bylaws. Resolution moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Platnevitz, that bylaw 2023-049 be read a first and second time and provisionally adopted in open council. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Thank you. Wow. So we have, just give me a second. Okay, so the next one is a resolution moved by Councillor Gunson, seconded by Councillor Dirksen, that bylaw 2023-050 and 2023-051 be read a first, second, and third time and pass in open council, seal the corporation. And those are the two items, the Braemar and the site plan for Royal Terrace, I believe. All in favor of that motion? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Informatory bylaw, moved by Councillor Zimmerman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, the bylaw 2023-052, confirm actions of the Council Corporation of the Town of Minto, expecting a meeting held August 8th, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time and pass an open council, seal the corporation. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Adjournment. Resolution moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Dirksen, that the Council of the Town of Minto adjourns to meet again at the call of the mayor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.